The Forge World Black Books have some wonderful but really infuriating pieces of artwork. The colour plates are particularly vexing. The level of micro detail just isn't something you can really easily replicate on a miniature, let alone across an entire army. Even though you really want to. You really, really, really want to. So this tutorial is how to create microchipping on 32mm miniatures. But the first thing you need to do is cut all the hair off your best brush. Step 1. Invent a new brush. Natural Sponge gives us the opportunity to create some really wonderful textures on our miniatures. It's mainly used by portraiture artists to wet canvases, produce texture when using paints, or generally just to wipe down your working space. Tremendously cheap. You can buy them from most places, most semi-decent art stores. I suggest getting a pack because they come with all different kinds of different textures. And another good tip for you, never throw away a bad brush. You can kill it with a knife and resurrect it by gluing on a new head. In this case, I tried a piece of sponge that gave me a nice, small, finely knit texture. There's nothing more complex than that to it. I dare say in 6 months' time that somebody might come out with a new brush. Says the best thing since sliced bread, and it will improve your miniature painting no end and charge you 3 times the amount for the pleasure of using the brush when you could just make your own. So the sponge I chose had quite a finely knit surface to it. Very small holes. There are different sponges with different textures. I suggest making a variety of them. You could create a whole host, a gang of brushes. Let's create the collective term for a bunch of brushes. It's a gang of brushes together. So my first experiment with this brush didn't go well. And you're about to see why, because I'm not used to dealing with the material, of course. I'll pop a little bit of red onto my thumb, and using it completely and utterly dry, I'll pop it onto the brush, and I'll try and add it to the miniature to add artificial texture. Now, one thing I experienced here is that no paint was coming off. This is what I kind of wanted. You do want it to feel like a dry brush consistency. That very little paint comes off the brush onto the miniature and leaves those kind of like hold textured behind. However, nothing was coming off the brush. The sponge was absorbing the natural moisture in the paint. So I wet the sponge ever so slightly, and it all floofed out. It all plumed out because as the sponge was hydrated, it expanded. Of course it would. However, this had its own issue in that there was just simply too much water in the sponge. It was flooded. Anything I added left a rather nasty tide mark behind, and this is exactly what I do not want with this procedure. I want nice, tightly knit texture lines, so that's my first experiment, ending in abysmal failure. But like a phoenix from the ashes, step 2 comes along, entitled Paint Awesomely. So the tip of the brush is ever so slightly damp. It's not wet. It has been wetted slightly to allow it to dry before applying any paint to the surface. And then we apply paint straight from the pot. There's a surprising amount of natural moisture left in the sponge itself. I mean, the clue's in the name, right? It's a sponge, of course, is absorbent. We don't need that much water in there. It's very, very damp, and I bleed off any excess paint on a piece of paper. Now, if you were curious about the recipe for the Sons of Horus scheme, it is available on the Patreon right now. All you have to do via a web browser is log yourself in, go to the search function, which is available on the web browser, not unfortunately on the app, but it is available on the web browser. Type in Sons of Horus, and away you go. This video tutorial is dedicated solely to this technique of microchipping, and you can replace this with any recipe that you like. So if you're painting Blood Angels, you can replace it with Sunny Skin Tone, a bit of Hot Orange. If you're painting Emperor's Children, you go Sunset Purple, golden skin tone, etc., etc. In this case, we're using a mixture of Horus green, Sybarite green, I believe that is, as well as a small amount of light flesh from Vallejo. We've mixed these in all different kinds of quantities to produce very light highlighting to the miniature, those microchips. The aim is to create very strong top highlights initially. The incidental speckling that you can see on the original image, I want to recreate on my own miniature. I work slowly building up the texture and layers, and I think this is something that I fell a cropper of in the first instance. I try to have that instant texture, one layer, one fits all, which simply isn't the case. That's not how you paint. You need to build up in overlapping layers, so we can go slightly brighter, we can include a bit more of the Sons of Horus green in the mid-tone, and we overlap between these three colours to create a nice nuanced blend and speckle. And this stage is really therapeutic because you're never sure exactly what pattern you're about to produce. You need to trust the sponge to do its work. Anything that you mess up on, well, you could correct with a brush, which I show you in this video. Now, the applications of this, it was designed for armor plate to recreate the thing I saw in the Forge World color plate. However, we could branch this out much, much wider. We could do leather effects, certainly. Broken metal effects. Hell, you could even do skin tones with this. So please don't feel like this is limiting you in any way. This is a new tool for you to explore, to develop, and hopefully produce something that even I haven't thought of. The aim with the next layer is to add very hard-edged highlights to the very top portions of the miniature, so there's very hard edges that you want to try and hit and develop and add interest and nuance to. Oh, and by the way, have you ever painted with your thumb before? So something I get a lot of students to do when I'm asking them to mix up a custom colour, I'll ask them to make a little swatch on their thumb. I swear, if anybody hacked my account, they'd think I'd have a really, really weird fetish. If you have an interesting looking thumb, please feel free to send it along. I'd love to see it. You don't have to be a student to send me a thumb. Thumbs or dogs or cats. I'm a big animal lover. But if you own a giraffe, send a picture of that as well. I'll get off on anything. Right, back to microchipping. So the sponge will overlap the metallic. I had this brainwave halfway through the painting process. I wouldn't apply it at this stage. I'd do it before I'd start blocking in the metallics, the silvers, the rest of the detail. It's just one of those things. Inspiration struck. I had to try it out. So this is a little bit messy. Don't feel like this is the order that you necessarily take it in. Instead, apply this before you add the other details to the miniature. I'm just glad I didn't paint his face first. Okay. Our sponge can only take us so far. We need to go back to traditional brushwork. So light flesh is added to a pinch of Sybarite green. Using a 000 brush, I believe here, Winsor & Newton Series 7. I want to add definition to the top of the gorget, and indeed top of the chest, top of the shoulder pads, and if he had one, a helmet as well. The structure has been built up, has been applied initially with the airbrush. The armor's been chipped up using a realistic chipping technique, again, which is explained in the Sons of Horus tutorial. And now it's time to add some really nice tight detailing work to express the armor plate. Neck guard, knuckles. Knuckles are a great place to add these details to, because you imagine this guy, he spends most of his life punching things, right? He'll punch through walls, he'll punch through people's faces, he'll punch through rock. Give him something to punch, he'll punch through it. So there'll naturally be a more amount of chipping around those areas where he's thrusting through. So around his knee joints, where he's throwing his knee into things, the van braces. Have a little bit of imagination. Imagine this guy punching and kicking and taking bullet wounds. Where exactly would they develop? Mainly on the shoulder pads. Some large areas of chipping, broken, fractured appearances would look natural there. And again, like we said previously, rather poetically, that the chipping is the story of the miniature. Where exactly did this miniature pick up that chip? Where did he pick up that bullet wound? Where would it naturally occur? You're telling a story, so make sure it's a good one. And from here, we can overlap these techniques. I'm still getting a handle of using the sponge on my own miniatures. In the next couple of seconds, you'll see me overlap what I've done with the brush, with the sponge again. And it's up to you how many times you want to overlap them between brushwork and sponge work. Keep overlapping these techniques. See what glorious mess you can make of the armor plates, and what wonderful textures you can create. And that is it for this very short and sweet video tutorial on how to create microchipping and how to invent your own brush. How exciting is that? Can't wait to merchandise this. Thank you very much, guys, and I'll catch you in the next video. Oh, by the way, the next video is Brush Masterclass, Magnus Kallgaard. If you have any questions about brush dilution, paint dilution rather, anything about the video at all, please get in touch, because I'll add a Q&A at the end of that video answering your question specifically. Thank you very much. I'm going to say goodbye again. Catch you next time.